Tell us about that photo. Is there a story behind it? What sort of equipment did you use? Welcome to Through the Lens of Faith, 135 years of Courier photojournalism podcast, where we're getting the stories behind some of the photos that will be on display in a Catholic Courier photo exhibition this October. Now, here are your hosts, Gina Capellazzi and Rebecca LeClaire. I'm excited to welcome back Chief Photographer Jeff Witherow to the podcast. Jeff has been a photographer at the Courier since 2015 and Chief Photographer since 2018. In our first episode, he talked about the importance of photojournalism and a little bit about our photo exhibit. But today, he and I are going to chat about a trip to the National Catholic Youth Conference in 2017 and the photo he selected from that trip for our photo exhibit. So I'm excited to talk about this trip that we made 7 years ago. Now, my co-host, Rebecca LeClaire, was unable to be with us today, but she sent along some questions to help us navigate the conversation. So her first question was, what is the National Catholic Youth Conference, NCYC, as it's called for short? Well, the National Catholic Youth Conference is this conference that is held every year in two places of the country.
Every other year, isn't it?
No, actually, recently they decided to make it a yearly conference. So it takes place every year. This year it's taking place in California, and then in 2025 it'll take place in Indianapolis. So they've now made it a smaller conference. There's only like about 12,000 people, and compared to when we went, when there were 20,000 young people. But it's just a conference for young people, Catholic young teens, to celebrate their faith. There's speakers, there's musicians, there's all sorts of things. And we went in 2017 in Indianapolis. But yes, now it is a yearly conference. You did not know that.
What you're saying is we can go to California next time.
The diocese doesn't go to California, unfortunately, Jeff, or we would be able to go. But the next trip is in 2025. So in Indianapolis, though.
Okay.
Now, the next question, how did the trip come about? And was this your first work trip?
I
want to hear your story about how this trip came about.
So my recollection is I got an email from you, or maybe you stopped by my desk and said, guess what, we're going to go do this thing. How do you feel about that? Doesn't matter how you feel because it's happening.
Okay, that's close.
So I luckily I was on board regardless.
Yeah.
But I think that you did a lot of the planning for this, and I was just along for the ride.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I had never went to NCYC as a teen, but hearing that we were sending like 500 young people to NCYC, I thought, well, how can we best tell this story? So I did pitch the idea first to Karen Franz, our general manager, and Jennifer Fakaya, our managing editor, if this is something we could do. They both said yes. So then I had to, of course, tell you. You were on board. You had no clue.
Always the last to know.
What?
Always the last to know.
Yep. And I think we had to also purchase a video camera, but I also had to work with...
Is that when we purchased the video
camera? Yes, that's when we
wow.
purchased our first video camera. It was 2017. And then I had to work with the diocese to plan our trip on, where we were going to stay, how we were going to get there, and all of that stuff. So yes, I did indeed take care of all the planning. It was my initial idea from the start, because I had covered the event in 2015, but I did it from here at home. And I thought, how can you better show what goes on there by actually going there?
And I think we got a lot of the same treatment that the youths get on the same trip, because we took the bus down with the group. We stayed in the same hotel. We stuck to their same schedule.
Oh, yeah. We did that whole schedule.
So we made up for you missing out as a teen.
Yes, but it was a very different experience as a 30-something-year-old than a teenager for sure. And as you just said, talk about how we got there. We took the bus.
We hopped on a bus with a youth group from Mendon, I believe.
Yeah, there were two. I think St. Pius.
That's right. It was St. Pius.
St. Pius, and I believe the other one was St. John of Rochester.
Oh, St. John of
His
Rochester.
Father,
okay,
Peter
so
Clifford
it wasn't
was on the bus with us.
Okay.
But yeah, we left during early morning and got there mid-afternoon.
We drove overnight.
Yeah, and we drove overnight coming back, and that's a standard for all of the teens that go from the diocese. As soon as the conference is over, they head on a bus and they drive back that night and get back the next Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. It's a Sunday morning, so so we did that. What was the trip like, in a sense?
So the trip, you started off your day very early. You got up and you were on the bus to head to the convention center by about 7:30 in the morning. I think we
it was really early.
Because the event started very early and the bus was our only way to get there.
Yeah.
So
because the diocese stayed outside of the downtown vicinity, so we had to take the bus to
they stayed next to that cool mall, so we got to go explore. The teens got to explore the mall.
They did get to explore the mall.
It was a nice experience for them.
Before the conference began. They were there for the conference, Jeff. But yes, we did go to the mall, and we did get lost trying to find food the first night. I do remember that.
We got Panda Express.
I think we did. But yes, so you had to take the bus every
morning.
Morning and every night to the convention center and Lucas Oil Stadium, which was
they're side by side. Yep. So the first half of the day, obviously, it was a lot of speakers. It was a lot of vendors and a whole bunch of other things for them to see and take part in. And then in the evening, everybody would come together at the stadium, and they would have a big concert, and they would have mass. They would have, help me.
There was adoration, which is an experience in itself. That whole Lucas Oil Stadium is packed with all these kids and their chaperones, and it gets so quiet that you can hear a pin drop. It's a cool experience. I never experienced an adoration like that, so that was another thing. There was the name has gotten changed so many times. It's called the Thematic Village, where the kids can play games and there's music and there's different vendors and they can do service projects. It's this big room. A lot of kids at the same time. That's where also they do a lot of trading, which we did try our hands in some trading of hats. The year we went, the diocese was celebrating its anniversary, I think 150th anniversary, and we had birthday hats, and we actually had birthday hats, and we attempted.
We got them early.
Yes. Yeah, and you did.
Did we trade them? I feel like we still have one.
I still have mine, but I think you traded yours.
Oh. I'm glad you remember all this stuff, because I don't.
I had a feeling, but what were you feeling heading into this trip?
I didn't know what to expect, and so I was trying to prepare for any scenario. I didn't know exactly, am I shooting a big event? Am I shooting these small events? So what equipment do I bring? And when I got there, I realized that there was just so much to photograph. It was not going to be an issue finding any. It was not hard to work, because there was so many things to take pictures of. There was so many events going on, and it was an all day affair. And I think I should have looked up how many photos I took. How many days were we there? 3 or 4 days?
We were there 3 days.
3 days.
Yeah.
I should have looked up how many photos I took, because it was thousands and thousands of photos and gigabytes. So we had to then, pour through all those images and pick out however many we used for that multimedia project.
Right.
And it ended up being one of our strongest multimedia projects, just because there was so many pictures to choose from. I got to use the best 50 or 100 or however many it was.
Yeah. I wish I tracked my steps as well, because we walked around that Lucas Oil Stadium, the floor, I don't know how many times, and plus within the convention center, you were going from room to room, and in the thematic village or park or whatever they call it, you were walking around all of that. So I wish I calculated our steps, but I was a little overwhelmed, because I had this plan in mind without ever having gone to this conference. And then I felt like I was emailing back here, and I'm like, I don't have this. I can't go on social media right now. It's just, there was so much going on. It was very hard to keep track of, well, how am I going to do all of this?
I remember one of my hardest things was finding kids from the diocese.
Yes.
Because you think, oh, okay, well, everybody has a birthday hat. But no, they trade their hats. So, this kid might be from Philadelphia, and you don't know.
Yeah.
But he's got a birthday hat on from the Diocese of Rochester. So, the name tags were very helpful when you could spot a name tag.
And they had shirts.
They had shirts. And
too, which helped.
a lot of the photos, you'll see the kids either have a name tag or a shirt in the shot, and that's why. So if you want to get in the picture, identify yourself appropriately.
Yeah. So let's talk about the photos, because you took so many. You cannot have every photo in the exhibit be from NCYC. So why did you choose this one photo? First, describe it too for those who are just listening to us, and why you chose that photo.
The photo is somewhat of a silhouette of the backs of some people. It's a small group, and they have their hands up, and they're facing the stage one evening. I don't remember what was happening that evening, if it was a speaker or if it wasn't during Mass, was it? Do you recall?
I don't think it was during Mass.
I don't think it was during a Mass. And it's very blue. It's got a nice kind of color palette to it, even though I think it's a little muddy, but it's very blue colors. I think I picked this one because I think it stood out to me as being a good standalone to kind of illustrate the whole event in just that one photo. There was so many pictures I took where it shows small pieces of each thing. But you can't have more than one in this exhibit. I think it was one of the photos that got used frequently back when we were using this project. I think it ran as the banner for probably that same reason. So that stood out to me for that. Do you like the photo?
I like the photo. I loved all your photos from NCYC. There were so many good ones. Now, were those people in the photo from our diocese, or did you ever figure out who they were?
I'm not going to lie. I took the photo and then I wandered off. So I found that photo in editing, and then I was like, oh, that's a nice photo. I wish I had gotten their names.
Yeah.
Because usually when it's the back of people's heads,
Yeah.
I don't go out of my way to identify them. So they might be. They could be.
It could be.
Probably not.
Any other particular stories or memories that we have from this trip? We have stories that probably we don't want to share.
Which ones don't we want to share?
Well, should I share it? I might share it. What happened, Jeff, when you were in a seminar, I guess?
As I've said, it was very long days. And on the third day, I was very tired. You get up at 7:30 in the morning, or you get in the bus at 7:30. You get back.
Very long days.
You get back to your hotel room about 11:30?
Yeah.
So I was very sleepy. And I had sat down to rest my feet, and I may have fallen asleep. And when I woke up, there was a large stream of people streaming past me because I fell asleep in an exit. And the whole thing was very jarring because I didn't realize I was sleeping.
No. I think you came in, I was in the media room, and you came in and said, I think I just fell asleep during a workshop. And I was like, how do you know you fell asleep? Well, people were walking over me as they were exiting.
They were very understanding. Nobody seemed inconvenienced.
Okay.
So, but yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. It's been now 7 years, so I don't remember a lot of the other
Yeah,
things.
exactly. It's been 7 years. Yeah. I remember they had a food truck rodeo come by.
Yes.
And I got a pretty mean, it was like a burrito bowl.
Yeah. And that was on a day when we actually did eat. I do remember the day before, we went pretty much all day without eating. We had breakfast, and then I think it wasn't until late that night that someone told us, oh, you guys need to go eat. And they watched our equipment, and we went and grabbed a hot dog that wasn't really good, but we hadn't eaten. We were going nonstop from 7:30 until 11:30 at night. So that makes sense of why we would have probably fallen asleep in a seminar or workshop, or done something like not eat all day either. But yes, we did the food trucks, and we did get to go to dinner with a parish and their young people. That was another
Boca de Beppo?
Yes,
is that the name of it?
Yep, and that was, I think, that last night before we went as well. So yeah. Have you been back to NCYC? I have my answer, but
I have not been back to NCYC.
I actually have been back twice since that trip, but not for media. I went back in 2019 as a chaperone with my parish's youth group, and then just went back last November in 2023 as the group leader for my parish because our youth minister at the last minute was not able to attend. So I was responsible for 5 teenage girls. Different experience every time.
How do they compare?
Well, it's just a different experience. In 2017...
Were they as exhausting?
Just as, yes,
Really?
definitely. Because it's exhausting because you are now taking on a responsibility of worrying about these 5 young girls. They're your responsibility. So if they're not in your sight, you're wondering where they are. Are they in a workshop? Are they participating? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Are they responding to a text message or something like that? So it's a whole different experience. But it's really cool to also watch it through their eyes, compared to in 2017 watching it through a viewfinder of a camera. I'm watching it through their eyes, seeing their excitement, seeing their joy and dancing and everything that comes with that. So it's a really cool experience. Will I go in 2025? I don't know, but I know that our teens are excited to go again. So I might be going again in 2025. Have you traveled for other work trips?
Most recently, we went to, how do you pronounce it? Orisville. Yeah. Yes, for the New York State Eucharistic Congress, that was another overnighter.
Yeah.
That was a great trip. That was another event where there was things happening all day, so there was lots of picture opportunities. Very fascinating place, very interesting scenery. It was in the fall we went.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of muddy, kind of a little wet.
A little muddy, but I think we were well prepared.
Yeah, we were prepared.
I bought new hiking shoes and rain gear.
It was going to be rain out the whole weekend, but no, that was a really cool experience. I had never been there, and we went down on one day and we came back we went down the first day, stayed overnight, and we came back the next day. So I thought that was a really good trip as well. We also did the March for Life. That was, if we could do a bus for NCYC, that bus was even harder because we went down at 10 o'clock at night and got to DC at 6 in the morning and went nonstop the whole day. And then got back on the bus and came back. And we went with the kids from Notre Dame of Elmira.
Right, so we had to drive down to Elmira, hop on the bus.
And you then drove, once we got back at really late, I think we got back at 1 or 2 a.m. You drove back home. I ended up staying in the night in Elmira and then drove back the next morning. Just didn't feel comfortable driving after trying to sleep on a bus. But yeah, I had never been to a March for Life before, and that was quite an experience. 22,000 in Indianapolis was nowhere near the amount of people that you had to deal with. It was packed, and you're moving. You're moving on, the whole entire time. You can't put anything down.
So, which is your favorite trip out of the 3?
Oh, I don't know. What's yours? Go first.
Probably NCYC. I think that had the most photo opportunities.
Yeah, that and then. I'd say Orisville would be second.
Yeah, that was a great trip.
Yeah. So we don't know what's next if we get another work trip, but NCYC I think kind of started it all because as soon as we came back from NCYC,
it'll be our turn to go to Rome or to Mexico City or to Poland.
We've been talking to all these photographers who've gotten to go to Rome, Mexico, the Holy Land.
Yeah, you feel a little cheated.
Yeah, we've gone. Indianapolis.
DC. How do you feel about Indiana? You want to go to Indiana?
Well, thanks, Jeff, for coming back on the podcast and talking about our NCYC trip. You can see that NCYC photo that Jeff took along with other photos of Jeff's in our photo exhibit this October. For more information, visit our website, catholiccourier.com/lens of faith. Greg Francis was a staff photographer at the Catholic Courier from 1997 to 1999. Today, he's still one of our freelance photographers, helping to cover events when our current chief photographer, Jeff Witherow, isn't available.
Now, back in 1998, when Greg was on the staff as a photographer, he traveled to Israel and he was there for the Catholic Courier. and he was with staff writer Kathleen Schwar. Now, they were there to cover an interfaith leadership mission, and it was led by Bishop Matthew Clark. So we want to start there, Greg, please. Tell us about this trip and what your mission was.
It was an interfaith pilgrimage made up of Catholics, non-Catholic deacons and priests from the Rochester area, as well as Jews, rabbis. Yeah, rabbis. Yeah.
And how did you get assigned with Kathleen to go cover it? Were you normally a team?
No, I was the only photographer, and I think maybe it was based on seniority for Kathleen. No, or something like that. Yeah.
And what was the goal of this, assignment? Because sometimes when you're in a newsroom, they have specifics that they want you to do versus what the actual mission of the event is like.
I think it was just interfaith understanding between the faiths. Yeah, I was attached to Bishop Clark at the hip, but we were with Protestant and Lutheran priests and all kinds of priests from Rochester, as well as rabbis.
Yeah, so the photo that is in the exhibit is of Bishop Matthew Clark. Can you describe this photo from his trip to Israel and how this came about?
We were on top of the Mount of Olives, and I just look up, and Bishop Clark is looking over the city of Jerusalem, I believe. I think this is what he was seeing right here.
Oh.
Right there. And it looks really good in color, but I only have it in black and white right now. And he was just he was just thinking. He was just thinking of the vastness in front of him. And actually, the whole trip was a lot of introflexion of like these two people just thinking. Yeah.
Analyzing their faiths. And with
Yeah.
this photograph, can you describe how you captured it? Because the lighting is very intricate and it's a kind of a specific time of day, I think, that helped tell the story of what he was experiencing.
Yeah, it was evening, and the sun was setting over Jerusalem, and he was just, I didn't add any lighting. And it was on film. It was on film.
And tell us how
Well-
that makes a difference to you as a photographer.
Well, you actually had to think back then on what you were doing. I'm
Well-
very good friends. I'm very good friends with a professor at a college down in Maryland, Maryland. He teaches most of his students now just use cell phones as cameras, and actually it was shot on film, analog, and it took thought.
Well, I can even see the light on Bishop Clark's face, but his backside is darkened. And then on the front of his leg, he has one leg up on the rim of a patio, I think, or something he was overlooking it. And so
Yeah,
that
that's a platform. Yeah. Yeah, that was a platform.
but
Yeah.
yet the light just captures that stance perfectly. And sometimes there's a lot of luck involved with photography, and other times
Yes.
you're really trying to make sure that the light is perfect, but that one you just had to grab at the moment, right?
Yes. Yes. And I've got to say, the Democrat and Chronicle had a photographer there too. It was actually a former Democrat and Chronicle photographer who was living in Israel because he was Jewish and he wanted to discover Israel. His name was Will Yearman. And I remember that a shirtless photo of Bishop Clark ran on the front of the DNC, and all the people in Rochester were all up in arms. You can't publish a photo of Bishop Clark. He was spreading mud on himself in a hot bath, maybe in the Dead Sea, and it ran on the front of the DNC. And I think a lot of traditional Catholics were up in arms about it. And I had the same frame of the same moment, and it did not run in the Courier.
Now when you talked about this was shot on film, I think of today when you can go back and look at an image and see if you got a really good image. Did you know at the time that you got this really good shot of Bishop Clark?
No, it's just I didn't see any of the film until 2 weeks after I got home, or a week after I got home. I went home. I got home and got back to Rochester, and I probably had 18 rolls of film, and I took it to the lab and didn't know what I had until a week later. Yeah, there was no instant gratification.
When you but actually printed it, did you know that's going to be the picture that will remind us of his trip to Israel, the bishop's trip?
One of two, yeah, one of two. There's also this one of the pilgrimage, all the participants climbing up right here a hill. And I just looked up and got them all in line. And I thought it would be that. And I think Bishop Clark is leading it right there. Yeah. Bishop Clark is leading it. And I thought it would be that one or that one.
We're so happy that that one in particular made it into the exhibit. But was that your first trip to Israel? Were you experiencing this as a pilgrim yourself?
That was my first trip outside the US other than to Canada. It was all new to me. I had never been outside of the US other than to Canada. And what's interesting is my wife and I just went to Italy last month. That was my first time to Europe, and she took me to the Vatican. We climbed up to the top of the Vatican, spent a whole day at the Vatican. My wife is I realized on the trip, actually, she's a much bigger Catholic than I realized. And it all came full circle last month when I went to Italy, and she took me to all these sites of sculptures and history, and it was amazing. It was really hot too. Oh, and there was one day in Israel where it was 120 degrees and I overslept, and they came to my hotel room and got me, and I forgot a bottle of water that day. And luckily Larry Fine, the head of the CEO of the Jewish Federation, gave me a bottle of water for the day.
I was going to ask, what sort of things did you see in Israel with the group? You talked about he's overlooking the Mount of Olives. Did you get to go down into the Mount of Olives? What other significant sites did you see in Israel?
We went to Bethlehem, and I shot this photo right here in Bethlehem. We went to the Dead Sea, and and this photo right here is a Catholic nun hugging a Jew at a Holocaust memorial. Right there. It's called Yad Vashem. And we went to the Dead Sea. This is a Catholic nun swimming in the Dead Sea. right, right there, and you float above it. And this was a little bit stark, but a Catholic nun on that trip said it was so hot and so barren in Israel. She says, "What?" This was a Catholic nun. She says, "Why would anyone fight over this land?" It was so barren and hot. It had holy religious significance to multiple faiths, but it was hot and barren.
I've been blessed to go to Israel twice in my life, and I share that sentiment, but I also share the sentiment of Bishop Clark when he was on that ledge overlooking, Jerusalem, because that's when you realize how the major religions of the world all are intensely juxtaposed right there within like a mile, around the old city of Jerusalem. And it's just mind boggling. And I know this trip was part of this historical agreement that the diocese signed here in Rochester with the Jewish Community Federation of Greater Rochester to work together and promote an understanding of their religions and their faiths and to try to prevent prejudice, that kind of thing. Did you get that sense as you were covering it that this was really working in terms of a leadership interfaith agreement that could come together and really live the test of time back here in Rochester?
Yes, yes. It made everyone on the trip more familiar with each other, and more familiar with each other, and I think it promoted cooperation with different groups in Rochester going forward.
Is there anything else you would like to tell us about this trip to Israel?
It was an odyssey. It was 9 days. Oh, and the final 2 days was when Osama bin Laden bombed the embassies in Africa, and everything changed. The final 2 days of the trip, coming home, everyone was on edge because terrorism was then on our mind. This was the early stages of Osama bin Laden, and coming back, there was just a heightened level of security through the airports and everything.
Okay. Well,
It's
thank
funny
you.
how that happens in hindsight.
Yeah, yeah. I'm guessing you didn't feel like worried or concerned about security while you were there?
No, no,
Okay.
no. It was a pretty peaceful time in Israel. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Greg, for joining us and sharing about your trip to Israel with Bishop Clark. You can see Greg's photo and other Courier photographers' photos in an exhibit this October. For more information, visit our website, catholiccourier.com/lensoffaith.